Welcome to Huff Goes to the Movies. My name is Eric Huffman II. Most people call me Huff, and some people know that I love going to the movies. And happy Toretto Tuesdays to everyone. This will be the final installment in my Toretto Tuesday series since Fast X is now in theaters. And speaking of Fast X, I do want to mention that because the film came out this past weekend and it opened up at #1, I'm sure that a lot of you have seen the film now, but I will handle most of the review in spoiler-free fashion, but I will talk some spoilers later in the video. I will be sure to have timestamps for that, and I will give a warning for that, of course. And then following the review, I will do a ranking of all the Fast and Furious films, including the Hobbs and Shaw spin-off films. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. So Fast X is directed by Leterrier. Originally, Justin Lin, who came back for F9, was going to direct, but he left the film early in production due to creative differences. A lot of rumors suggesting that him and Vin Diesel might have had a falling out, but he remains on as a writer and an executive producer. And it's unfortunate because Justin Lin is the filmmaker who really sort of molded the Fast and Furious into the massive tentpole that it is today, having directed the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th installments, and then coming back for F9. So it is an unfortunate thing to happen, but of course the show must go on, so they hired Louis Leterrier, who I think is probably best known for his work on the Incredible Hulk film from 2008, to fill in his shoes. So after Louis Leterrier was hired, they had him sort of do some rewrites on the script, and so I have no idea what this film was originally going to be, but it seems like a lot of it was retooled once they decided to hire a new director to lead the ship. And as far as the premise for Fast X, this really does sort of feel like a sequel to Fast 5. Dante Reyes is played by Jason Momoa. He is the son of the villain from Fast 5, Hernan Reyes. And we find out that he was there on the day that the family decided to pull off that vault heist that is sort of the climax of Fast 5. We find out that he was there, we find out that he lost his father, and so he's on a revenge mission against Dominic Toretto and his entire family. So this sort of puts him on a collision course, not just with Dominic Toretto, but also with Cypher, played by Charlize Theron. She makes an appearance early in the film, and we find out that those two sort of came to blows as well. And so really, this team is now split up all across the world, as they have been in the previous installments. And they are now trying to find a way to get back together so that they can take down Dante Reyes. There are other additions to this cast as well. Ritchson, who I think most people know from the Jack Reacher series, he is here playing Ames, someone who is now leading the agency in the wake of Mr. Nobody, played by Kurt Russell, going missing. Brie Larson plays Tess Nobody. She is the daughter of Mr. Nobody. Scott Eastwood, who was in Fate of the Furious, does come back for a little bit here as well. And really, Fast X feels like they are trying to retool from some of the more recent installments in the franchise. I think that if you were to ask most casual fans of this series, they would probably say that that stretch of time between Fast 5 and Furious 7 was when the franchise was really at its peak. With Fate of the Furious, I think a lot of that felt very unnecessary, but it's such a big franchise that the studio kind of had to keep going. And then F9 is a film that I think is notorious for really just severing all ties with reality. Everything from magnet cars to minefields to canyon jumps to going into outer space. And really, I think the strength of Fast X is that this feels like a bit of a return to form to some of the better eras of the franchise. While this does still have a lot of characters and a lot of plot and a lot of melodrama, I think that Fast X works better than F9 in that there don't seem to be as many long, awkward pauses for the drama to kick in. Now, while these characters have always been treated in a very sincere and endearing manner, we might laugh at some of the things happening as far as the drama, but the movies themselves are taking that aspect quite seriously. I think that Fast X actually benefits from starting with some of the family drama, but really just kicking into full-blown thrill ride after that. This kind of feels like a bit of a Fast and Furious roller coaster with one amazing action set piece after the other and a lot of chaos ensuing. The film doesn't use a lot of times to stop and take a breath, and while that might be overwhelming for a lot of people, I think that it works better in that the film feels like it's moving at a better pace than the theatrical release of F9. Now, in my review of F9, I said that I watched the extended edition on HBO Max, which adds about 7 or 8 minutes to the runtime. And while it was a film that always felt a bit overstuffed, those additional minutes do sort of help the film breathe a bit. And I think they allow for scenes in the film to make smoother transitions. It'll be hard to tell if we're going to get an extended version of Fast X when it hits streaming, but I'm willing to bet that for a film that has so much plot and so many characters, there are a lot of additional moments that were probably left on the cutting room floor. But even without that, Fast X is a better paced film than F9, and while these films are no longer taking place in reality, I think that Fast X does just enough to get back to trying to ride that line, and I think that it works to great benefit. But the real standout here is Jason Momoa as Dante Reyes. He is such an improvement over John Cena's role in F9, and I like John Cena a lot, of course, with F9 coming out in the first part of that year. We would later see with James Gunn's The Suicide Squad that John Cena is a much more capable performer when he's sort of put front and center. This continued with the Peacemaker spin-off series that sort of follows his characters after the events of The Suicide Squad. John Cena has proven himself to be a capable lead actor, someone who can master comedy and even some of the more emotional aspects. But here, Dante Reyes is given a lot more charisma. He's given a lot more just fun to be had. And Jason Momoa leans all the way into that. The way that I think a lot of people imagine Jason Momoa to be in real life, sans murder, he really leans into that. He is a fun-loving guy. He's very flamboyant. He paints his nails. He wears vibrant colors. He cracks a smile at some of the most sinister things that he's about to do. And he really is a force to be reckoned with. I mean, he really does want to make Dominic Toretto suffer. And I think that he just provides a better balance to Vin Diesel's character here than John Cena did. With F9, Jacob and Dom were both sort of smoldering muscle men. And I think here, Vin Diesel definitely does get his smolder on, but I think that Jason Momoa's sort of fun-loving, flamboyant personality is a really good balance to that. And so I think it makes the scenes where they interact much more engaging. One of the other things that I think is a massive strength of Fast X is that this feels like a much better attempt at doing a crossover than F9 and Fate of the Furious. So as these films have gotten bigger and we've added more members to the cast and more members to the family, we do have fun callbacks to all of these different events that have happened in the series. And in some instances, it can be fun, like with Fate of the Furious, the appearance of Leo and Santos. But I think here, this feels much more like the Fast and Furious crossover event that Fast 5 was when it came out in 2011. A lot of critics have been comparing this to Avengers Infinity War, and I think that's an apt comparison. This really does feel like the event of the Fast and Furious saga. We get all of these different characters that we've met all throughout our 20-year history. We get callbacks to all of the films, whether it's the original film or Too Fast, Too Furious, and even some callbacks to things like Tokyo Drift. I love the fact that this does really function much better as an event or the start of an event, because something worth mentioning is that this film definitely ends on a cliffhanger. I won't say it just now sort of what happens at the end, but this very much feels like the studio saw that this franchise probably needs to wrap it up, and they decided that the best way to do that is to go about with a bang or a multi-part bang. When Fast X was announced, we originally heard that it was going to be the first part in a two-part story, but then Vin Diesel appeared on the red carpet of the premiere in Rome, and he said that this will actually be the first part of a trilogy. Based on how this film performed at the box office, I don't quite know that there is enough gas in the tank for this to sort of go the distance as a trilogy, but I do think that in trying to take all of the disparate elements of the series and bring them all together for sort of one big thrill ride event, one last ride, as Dom has said several times in this franchise, I think that that's actually a smart move. And I think that Fast X provides just enough thrills, just enough momentum, just enough action to not fall into the trap that a lot of other Part 1 films have. When I think about films like Pirates of the Caribbean 2 or The Matrix Reloaded or the way they split up The Hunger Games or Harry Potter or Twilight, those films do feel far too incomplete, in my opinion, to work as standalone films. But I think that Fast X works like a thrill ride in that once things start moving, they never really stop. And the film ends in a way where you're just gripping your seat waiting to see what happens next. And so I think that this actually works much better as a part one sort of film than a lot of other films that we've gotten. So overall, I really did enjoy Fast X as a fan of the franchise and someone who is a defender of F9. I definitely can't wait to see where it goes from here. I do have some criticisms though, and I will get into that right now. My first main criticism of the film is that there's not enough Michelle Rodriguez. Letty's character is sort of separated from this family early in the film, and she sort of stays isolated away from everyone else. And I think that Michelle Rodriguez is such a crucial character here. She plays such a crucial role, and her character juxtaposed to guys like Roman or Han or Dom, it's just such a good balance to have. And so for her to be away from everyone for the majority of the film, to me, I think is a weak point. Though, we do get some fun moments between her and Charlize Theron and her and Brie Larson, so those are cool, those are crazy and absurd, but also I just hope that in the next film, we do get more of Michelle Rodriguez being a part of the family again. Another big flaw, I think, for this film is that it feels like the only thing this franchise can do now is harken back to its past. So yes, we're going back to the events of Fast 5, and it just so happens the villain had a son, and it just so happens this other character had a sibling, and this other character had a friend who was in waiting. And so, while I appreciate how these films sort of sincerely lean into that sort of soap opera-esque style of storytelling, it does become a little too repetitive, and I think that as these films are winding down, they should just start trimming some of the fat, so to speak. I mean, we have more than enough characters in these movies. We can go ahead and just focus on the story at hand. We don't need any more members of the family. Listen, I love the family aspect here. I love how they play it, but also we can try to aim for that target. We can try to hit the conclusion here. Another thing worth saying about this film is that if it has not already been spoiled, there is a mid-credit scene for this film, and if you're a fan of the franchise, it's one that you're definitely going to want to see. It was very exciting. It played great in the theater I was in. People were yelling. People were cheering, people were clapping. A guy down the road from me just decided to shout cinema because of course. But it is worth noting that major publications, especially The Wrap, did spoil this scene for fans. And they didn't just spoil it, they spoiled the entire context of it. So why would The Wrap do this? I have no idea. It feels like in the last several years we've had major publications who know these franchises who feel like giving away details that they know that fans don't want to be spoiled. So shame on The Wrap, shame on Humberto Gonzalez, you especially, man. Like I don't know if you're a Fast and Furious fan, but you're close enough to fandom to understand why certain things don't need to be spoiled. So I hope that in the future, these publications can use a lot more discretion when it comes to how they reveal information about the films that they're covering, especially when they know that people are excited for those films. But overall, Fast X is a fun time. It is an absurd time. If you're a fan of the franchise, I think you'll enjoy it. And if you're someone who felt burned by F9, I think this will be the sort of thing that starts to pull you back in. This feels like it's trying to tether itself to reality just a little bit, but also I think that this is just a better paced film than F9, and it feels like it knows what it wants to be, and it's leaning into the fact that these movies function best when they're just amusement park rides. So overall, if I had to give a star rating to Fast X, I would probably say that it is a 3.5 out of 5 stars. But that is all that I will say in the spoiler-free portion of this video. I am now moving into some spoilers for the film, so if you don't want anything spoiled, but you do want to see my ranking of the series, you can skip ahead to that. I do have timestamps down below for that. Spoilers for Fast X coming in 3, 2, 1. How in the hell is Giselle still alive? Make it make sense. Or maybe don't try to make it make sense. Listen, I love Gal Gadot. I think she's wonderful as Giselle. I could stare at that woman all day long. She is such a warm presence in these films, and her smile is just everything. But also, why? Listen, the loss of Giselle in Fast and Furious 6 is one of the heartbreaking moments in this series, and it leaves Han so distraught that he moves to Japan. But why are we bringing Giselle back? I mean, I get it. The Wonder Woman films have wrapped up. The DC universe is about to be reset in some way. So Gal Gadot's time as Wonder Woman has probably come to a close. I think she was great. But why bring her back? Why pull your franchise into the trappings of having to explain yet another character who we all believed was dead being alive the whole time? And listen, I'm sure that when her and Han meet face to face, it'll be a beautiful moment. But also, why are we doing this? There are so many characters in these movies already. Why are we adding to the fold in ways that presumably make absolutely no sense? But also, Dwayne Johnson, thank you. Listen, I have my thoughts about Hobbs as a member of the family. I think he functions better as an antagonist, but having The Rock come back in these films after the awkward absence of F9 and the awkward sort of framing of him and Vin Diesel in Fate of the Furious, I think it's a good sign that he decided to come back. And this is probably due to the fact that Black Adam is not going to fight Superman on screen. But you know what? Whatever. It was good to see him back. It's great to hear him say, "some bitch." That's just wonderful. That brings joy to my heart. I laughed hysterically when I saw it in the theater, and I cannot wait to see The Rock attempt to fight Aquaman. The movie version or the TV version. Anyway, that's all that I want to say when it comes to spoilers, really. Oh, wait. One more thing. We're getting a CGI Paul Walker, right? I mean, the way that Mia functions in these movies without Brian being there, they're gonna try and find a way to bring Brian back, right? And that's gonna be done with a deepfake or CGI or something. I'm not saying that I want to see this, but I think it's really awkward that Mia continues to have such presence in these films with Brian being off screen. I thought having him show up at the end of F9 with someone driving his car into the driveway, I thought that was a cool little touch. We didn't need to see anything. But Mia's presence here makes that such an awkward, uncomfortable thing. And I feel like deepfake Paul Walker is also going to be awkward and uncomfortable. If the family grants permission, if they're on board, okay. But also, that just feels like a really weird territory to step into. Okay, I am done with my spoilers for Fast X. If you've made it this far, then it is time for what I think is the most important part of the video, and that, of course, is the ranking. I am going to do this in order from my least favorite Fast and Furious film all the way to my favorite Fast and Furious film. Let's get into it with what I think is the weakest of all the Fast and Furious films. Coming in at number 11, The Fast and Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw. Now, this is an interesting one. Before doing the Toretto Tuesday series, I knew I wanted to do a ranking. I knew I wanted to revisit these. But I don't think I ever imagined that Hobbs and Shaw would be at the bottom of my list. And it really boils down to two things. One, I think this is the film that feels the least like anything else in the Fast and Furious franchise. But also, I think it's really uncomfortable to watch this film attempt to do so many bombastic things and try to walk up to that line of being like, yeah, we're Fast and Furious, but also not do that. There's a line at the end of Hobbs and Shaw where The Rock says, you believe in technology, but we believe in people. And the way that it's framed and the way that it's set up is so uncomfortable because family is right there. He literally uses his family to help save the world. Family is right there. And he doesn't say family. It's really weird. And also, this movie kind of feels like a very expensive Netflix film, meaning it's got the flash, it's got the look, but there's really nothing else here to hold on to. And I love Vanessa Kirby here. I think she's great. I could watch Vanessa Kirby do literally anything all day long, but Hobbs and Shaw to me is the weakest because it's the one that feels so unnecessary and so forced. And it's almost like got imposter syndrome because it's trying to be big and goofy and bombastic, but it also wants to have these sincere moments, but it's playing them in a way that's really not all that sincere. Coming in at number 10, Fast and Furious. And if you had asked me at the start of Toretto Tuesdays, I would have predicted that this would have been at the bottom of my list. Fast and Furious is an interesting one. It's a soft reboot of the franchise. It brings back the cast members of the original film, but it's got the director who came in with Tokyo Drift. It reorganizes the timeline, so we get to see Han interacting with Dom and Letty, and we are introduced to Leo and Santos. And it's big, it's got some bombastic action to it, and it feels like it's very much a follow-up to The Fast and the Furious. But this is the film that I think tonally just doesn't work. It's trying to hit all these beats. We think that Letty is dead. We see that Dom is sort of mourning her loss. We see how Paul Walker's character is trying to make amends for what he believes is his fault, but it just doesn't tonally work. These movies are best when they embrace how silly they can be. And while this movie has some silly moments, it feels like it's trying to be overly serious. And this is also the Fast and Furious film that I think has the least memorable sort of set piece to it. It's got the opening in the Dominican Republic, but other than that, I don't know that there's any moment in Fast and Furious that makes me go, I want to watch that clip on YouTube right now. Coming in at number 9 is Fate of the Furious. And really, this kind of boils down to the fact that while this is big and bombastic and silly and absurd and the action looks great, and it's cool to see these characters interacting again, and it's great to see the squad have to go against Dom, this is one that I think just leaves a really small impression. Like, I remember going to see Fate of the Furious on opening night, and I was very entertained, but I remember after that never really thinking about it. And outside of the callbacks that have been made in the subsequent films, Fate of the Furious is the film that I feel like I almost don't remember it happening, which is a shame. F. Gary Gray became the first black director for a $1 billion grossing film with this movie. And I don't even think the movie is bad, it's just completely forgettable. Charlize Theron as Cypher is okay, but I feel like her character is underwritten given Charlize Theron's talents. And while it's cool to see Deckard Shaw teaming up with the squad, with the family, I don't know. I mean, I feel like this is the first sign that this franchise was very much running out of ideas. Coming up after that, F9, The Fast Saga. This is the one where I think a lot of people would probably place it at the bottom of their list. This is the film that I think is responsible for a large portion of the audience not coming out to support Fast X on its opening weekend. This is the one that literally jumped several sharks, took the franchise to outer space. But I'm a defender of this, and now that I've seen the extended version of this, I think that this movie actually plays much better than people remember it. And yes, John Cena's character, Jacob, doesn't have a lot of charisma here, he doesn't have a lot of personality, and he feels overly redundant. But I do like the fact that this film does tie into Dominic Toretto's past. I think that those flashback sequences work really well, and I'm gonna say it, I think they made a mistake in bringing Han back. I love Sung Kang. I love Han. He is my favorite character in this franchise by a mile. But the fact that Han is back, and the fact that we get a backstory to it, but we don't get concrete explanation of how he is still alive, it just feels like a wasted opportunity. So wasted that perhaps they should have just not brought Han back. Which is a shame, because I think that that's even more egregious than the thing that people really hate about this movie, which is they finally went to space. I know, it's absurd. It is probably not scientifically possible. There are so many factors that aren't being considered in that portion of the film. But I think that sequence of Rome and Tej going into space is thrilling. I think it's really entertaining. And I think that it is just silly enough to fit within this franchise. And I love the fact that they incorporate the Tokyo Drift crew to make that happen. And I think it's a sign that Justin Lin has wanted to do that for a long time. He finally took advantage of that opportunity. Yeah, I mean, F9 has a lot of problems, but it's fun. It's really, really stupid, but it's a lot of fun. I'm a defender of it. I don't care what anyone says. It's my list anyway. Coming in with Fast X. To me, Fast X feels like it is trying to be tethered to reality just ever so slightly more than F9. And I think that this film does a better job of pacing itself so it doesn't have these awkward tonal shifts of big bombastic action, overly moody soap opera melodrama. I think that this movie starts off a little slower than F9, but once the ride starts, once it starts to do that incline that like a roller coaster would do, this movie just becomes a relentless thrill ride, and one that I had a lot of fun with. I got to see the film twice over its opening weekend, and both times I found myself enjoying it quite a bit. I do wish that Letty had had more of an active role in the plot, but the fact that this is trying to set up what was told to us as a trilogy as recently as this film's world premiere, I'm excited to see where they go from here. And I love how it functions as a massive crossover event for the franchise, so FX has earned its place on my list. Coming in at number 6, Too Fast, Too Furious. And honestly, this is a strange one. Too Fast, Too Furious is not great by any stretch of the imagination, but it does feel like such a sincere entry in the franchise. I really enjoy how Paul Walker and Tyrese play off of each other in this film. They're not given the best dialogue, as evidenced by the fact that Paul Walker says, "Forget about it, cuh." But it is just dumb fun, and it's hard to not crack a smile at all of the shenanigans that they get into with this film. And I think that John Singleton actually does pretty well with the racing sequences here. Yes, there's a lot of green screen and CGI cars, but also the way that the race scenes function in the movie, I think, are even better than they were in the original film. And I think that Tyrese's charisma is a much better balance to Paul Walker than some of the more stoic, reserved nature that Vin Diesel actually plays Dominic Toretto with in the original film. So while I don't think that Too Fast, Too Furious is an improvement over The Fast and the Furious, I think that it's just something that is able to lean into its goofy sense of fun. And yeah, not a great film, not an Oscar contender, but a fun time, something you can sort of kick back, have a drink, have a cold one, just sit back and enjoy it. And yeah, Too Fast, Too Furious still works quite well for me, and I hope that we get to see Eva Mendes come back in this franchise, and rest in peace to John Singleton. Coming in at number 5, the original, The Fast and the Furious. Going back to this film, given where these movies have gone, is sort of like being slapped in the face. In a good way. It is such a different film. It is just a remake of Point Break, but with street racing. And I think that while this film is not great, and while the racing is not great, some of the stunt work they pull off here is actually still quite thrilling and holds up today. But more importantly, I think this film does a wonderful job of building out the world of the Los Angeles underground street racing scene. We get to see how these characters view Dominic Toretto, we get to see how he interacts with others. We understand that it's not just about racing, but there's also a bit of gang warfare involved here. And I think that having the plot focus on will he or won't he when it comes to Brian O'Connor taking down Dominic, I think that it makes these characters feel a bit more relatable and they resonate just a little bit more. It does feel overly dramatic in times, but I think that Paul Walker and Vin Diesel both did a really good job of establishing sort of the dynamics of their relationship here. And I also think that all of the characters that we meet here leave quite an impression, especially Ja Rule. Coming in at number 4, The Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. In the early days of this franchise, when a lot of people had given up on it after seeing Bow Wow in the trailers for this film, I think that you would be correct in assuming that no one would ever call this film great. But honestly, now that I've revisited all these films, I have been a longtime defender of Tokyo Drift, and this rewatch through Toretto Tuesdays has only made me love it that much more. I think this movie is wonderful. I think it's great. And I think that Justin Lin took the right approach to how he crafted this story with screenwriter Chris Morgan. In a lot of ways, it kind of feels like a high school sports movie or a kung fu film. Patrick Willems has sort of made that comparison in the past. It's great to see the character of Sean have to learn how to race in this world. He's not just a new person in Tokyo having to get over the culture shock of moving from the American South to the Far East, but he also has to learn how to adjust in the racing world as well. And I love that this film has so much personality and character to it, and it leans into its Tokyo roots, its setting. We get to see more of the Tokyo nightlife. We get to run into the Yakuza. We get to sort of get over these language barriers with Sean. And while these characters haven't had much of an impact in the franchise going forward, I think that they work really well together. I mean, these don't have to be Academy, SAG level ensemble pieces here, but the pieces here fit so well. And the training bits that we get of Sean learning how to drift, learning how to operate through this scene, learning how to interact with the various characters of the Tokyo Underground, I love it. And I think that the soundtrack here only amplifies that. It's the type of movie where it drops you into a setting and you just don't want to leave. And I think that Justin Lin really nailed that tone. And I think that's why he was able to stay on with this franchise going forward. I mean, it's no mistake that he was able to direct 4, 5, 6, that he was able to come back for F9. He really did establish an identity with this franchise that I think when these movies are at their best, that's sort of the frequency that they're tapping into. And I think it all goes back to his work on Tokyo Drift. I think it's a great movie, and I think that more people deserve to give it more love. Coming in at number 3, Furious 7. Now at this point, Justin Lin had turned Fast and Furious into a legitimate blockbuster franchise. One that was able to contend with the Marvel movies that were coming out in that era. But due to some scheduling conflicts, he was not able to direct Furious 7, so they hired James Wan, who was mostly known for his horror films. But a good filmmaker is a good filmmaker. And I think that James Wan, being a fan of this franchise and being someone who had his own filmmaking style, he was sort of the perfect candidate to come in and take this franchise to a new level. We have already spoken about how overstuffed these movies can get with all the characters. You really start to feel that in this film, but for those weaknesses, where this movie soars is just next level. This, of course, features the now iconic skydiving with cars sequence in the film that then turns into a chase through a mountain range. I mean, Furious 7 really took no prisoners, and credit to James Wan for finding a way to finish this film despite the tragic loss of Paul Walker during the production, because I think that in a lesser filmmaker's hand, this movie could have really crumbled under that weight. But Furious 7 continues to just drive forward with some of the insanity that happens in this film. They drive between skyscrapers. They introduce this hacker element in the form of Ramsey and the God's Eye. There is the bonkers downtown LA sequence that sees them outrunning a drone and bringing down a parking lot and blowing up a helicopter. The Rock busts out of a cast after saying daddy's got to go to work. I mean, I think in a lesser filmmaker's hands, those elements there would have either been completely deleted or erased or cut from the final film, or you would have felt sort of this unrelenting shame for making something so silly. But James Wan is not afraid. He likes to scare people with his other films, but he was not afraid of the task here. And I love that he runs headfirst into that insanity. It does sort of officially transform these movies from like spy movies to superhero movies, but this was better than the Avengers movie that came out that same year. So, job well done. In second place, I'm going to go with Fast and Furious 6. Fun to note, and something that I probably should say, this is my wife's favorite movie in the franchise. This was the first Fast and Furious film that she saw. She went on a date, I believe, and she didn't know anything about the series up till then. She saw the sort of flashback that they have in the opening credits, and she said, okay, I guess I'm on board now. And to see Dom jump across a canyon and catch Letty in midair, it made her a fan for life. It is her favorite moment, and this is her favorite movie in the series. And I'll tell you what, it's hard not to put this at number one. I think that Fast and Furious 6 is the first entry in the franchise where going into it, your expectations were perfectly set. They had gone through the various characters in the first 3 films. They did the reboot of sorts in Fast and Furious. They did the massive crossover in Fast 5 and sort of really hit new heights. So going into Fast and Furious 6, audiences were primed for just how big the action was going to be, and it looks incredible. The London nighttime sequence with those little go-karts that have the flat tops, that's incredible. A lot of the explosives that they do in the early part of the film are great. The tank highway sequence is great, and the world's longest runway. I mean, I think with Justin Lin having done 3, 4, and 5, he was primed to take Fast and Furious 6 and deliver it with a level of confidence that he previously didn't have. And that's not to say that he did bad work on the other films. I mean, I have my opinions about Fast and Furious, but it's clear that he was allowed to grow with these films. And that growth shows in Fast 5, and it especially shows in Fast 6. But of course, it's not number one on my list. That goes to Fast 5. This is still the best entry in the franchise to me. I think it is the one that is the most balanced. I think it's the one that has the best mix of character moments and action. And I think that it is the one that shows the very real evolution of CGI cars, CGI settings to more practical stunt work with real locations. And it feels like the perfect blend of what these movies can be. It has the racing elements, it's got the heist elements, it's got the comedy, and the way that these characters are paired together and the chemistry that they have sort of as a large group but within each other and things like that, I think this is a perfect blend. I have no notes on this film. I gave it a 5-star rating when I did my review a few weeks ago. I still believe that to this day. Fast 5 is the Citizen Kane of the Fast and Furious franchise. It's better than all the Marvel movies, in my opinion. This one is just something different, and it's a special film to me. I remember seeing this in the theater, and I remember being blown away by it. I was already a fan of the franchise, but entries like this make me a fan for life. And so that is my ranking of all the Fast and Furious films. Guys, thank you so much for sticking with me on this journey. When I first drafted up the idea of doing Toretto Tuesdays, I kind of just said it as a joke. I didn't know that I would be able to sort of carry it through and be able to deliver all these reviews and be able to turn them around going into Fast X. But now that we have sort of reached the conclusion, I'm grateful that I did. I have seen the channel grow from doing this series. I have been able to chat with a lot of you via the comment section, and some of you have reached out on Instagram. It's great to find fans of this franchise. I think that the Fast and Furious films are often sort of written off as being these really dumb movies, and they are really dumb movies, but it's great to meet fans. It's great to meet people who genuinely love this stuff. And so all the support on the videos, the likes, the comments, the subscribers, sharing it with other people, it means a lot to me. And so going forward, I will still be doing reviews on movies, but after today, I will be doing no more star ratings in my reviews. If I like a film, I'm just going to say how much I liked it. If I didn't like a film, I will express my extreme disappointment with it. But films are hard, and people put their lives into this, their blood, sweat, and tears. And so while I can certainly say that I didn't like a film, I think to reduce it to a rating, it's just not something that I want to contribute to. Though I will still rate things on Letterboxd, but I feel like those are not really very serious. The reviews will be where I actually really share my thoughts in full detail. So I have more reviews coming soon. That is a wrap on Toretto Tuesday. Guys, thank you so much. It means the world to me. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. That always helps. If you have any other thoughts on things that I should review, what is your ranking on the Fast and Furious films? What did you think of Fast X? Join me in the comments and let me know. If you haven't already, do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. That way you can stay up to date on everything that I've got going on the channel. It means the world to me. But that's all. Once again, my name is Eric Huffman II, and most people call me Huff. Salute me familia. I will see you at the movies. Peace.